Hello friends, I'm Kayla. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to tell you my 9 favorite books of 2023. I landed on 9 because I've been putting off filming this video for days, trying to solidify that number 10 spot, and there were like 30 books vying for the position, so I decided instead of doing that, I would just do the top 9, and then tomorrow I'm going to do a whole bracket video on honorable mentions. If you want to hear all of my 5s and all of my 4.5s and any books that you think to yourself, how is that not in this video? I'll chat about it tomorrow. And I'd love to hear any books that you thought would be here that aren't. In that number 9 spot is Leech by Hiron Ennis. I didn't even know this would be here until my reread this week. Definitely shout out to my friend Patches for telling me how much I would love this. It's a gothic science fiction book. In it, we're following a nameless, genderless doctor who is part of this hive mind collective consciousness, collective knowledge base. And the doctor who came before them working at this chateau has recently passed. So they are here to take over, to help people and also look into this parasite that took the old doctor's life. It's an intentionally confusing book, which made the reread a real treat to get back to. There's a lot of medical jargon and body horror. It was about the colonization of bodies and minds as well as land, who is in power, who has control, who makes decisions over resources. I tabbed so many really amazing quotes and scenes. This was actually a Besties Book Club read this year, so there's a whole hour-long discussion that channel members participated in, and it was just a really fun time. It was heavy and weird and disturbing, but also fun. In the 8th spot is Natural Beauty by Ling Ling Huang. Shout out to my library for having a copy of this when I was looking for something to read for my Goodreads Choice Awards video, picking something from the horror category. I've now read this twice and need to give it back and buy myself a copy. Didn't know it would be here again until the reread. There were 2 books that I reread as potential like top 10 options that didn't make the cut and a couple that clearly did. And this is another body horror related book. We have our narrator following her in a couple different situations in life. One where she is a piano music prodigy at a conservatory, not really getting along with her classmates. And then one later in life where she is starting to work for this health and wellness spa. She starts to experience this pressure to participate in the treatments that she is offering clients. And then it has a lot to say about consumerism and corporate greed and morality, as well as of course the beauty industry and Eurocentric beauty standards themselves. The lines start to blur for her between coworker relationships and job expectation. It is this really slow, dread-filled build, excellently unsettling with wildly uncomfortable topics. And the ending completely hit it out of the park when other horror novels of this nature kind of lose it at the end. This one just rose to the occasion. In the number 7 spot is my first of 2 nonfiction books on this list. It's A Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliott. This and the next book I'm going to talk about were both read by me because I did this video where I read the first chapter of every book on my TBR shelf, and it led to me finding books with a total 10 out of 10 opener, and I read them immediately after, and they ended up being some of my favorite books of the year. This is one of the best essay collections I've ever read. It's by an Indigenous woman who's talking a lot about colonization and stolen language and land ownership, residential schools and intergenerational trauma and poverty, and each essay has a very clear intent, but it has like 3 to 4 different subjects that it's covering all at the same time, and neither one of them is forgotten in the pages. Everything comes back full circle, and she's just talking about such interesting things. There's one I remember that stands out so much to me about photography. It started out with her own relationship with being photographed and how she feels about that, and then also talked about how photography, people are so obsessed with capturing a moment and preserving a memory instead of preserving a natural resource or a landmark. It also talked about the idea of creating a narrative with a photograph and how journalists and photographers can tell any type of story they want, and they have all of this agency when the subject may not. So when people go into Indigenous communities especially and decide to tell their story for them. It was just so excellently written, and all of the topics, especially about mental health and the medical system, was really powerful. Not a single essay didn't land. The next book on my list, that first chapter, is one of the best first chapters I've ever read in a book. This is How Beautiful We Were by Mbolo Mbwe. It kicked off with us learning about this fictional African village and the way that they're being treated by this American oil company that has come in and is destroying the land, poisoning the people. It's a dense literary fiction novel following many voices over many years, multiple generations, dealing with this very real issue of modern colonization. It was absolutely harrowing and had such a compelling storytelling style that I can't even explain, but sometimes you'd be in the middle of a scene and you wouldn't fully get to understand the context, and it would switch to something else, and then you'd come back later to fully grasp the impact of what was missing from the pages. It was like putting together a puzzle in the least mystery way. I highly recommend the audiobook if you like full cast narrations. The chorus of children's voices that narrate portions of this was haunting. Cracking the top 5 is Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. Shout out to my friend Lindsay for being the reason I read this. It's general fiction with a little bit of weirdness. We're following 2 women who knew each other back in school. They have a little bit of a tumultuous relationship, and one of them has these stepkids who are just moving in with her. She is unprepared to deal with them and their spontaneous combustion, so she invites her friend to come live with them and care for these children. It's kind of a soft found family about this woman making these children feel safe, but also finding a space and a purpose for herself. More than anything though, it's funny. I don't find myself laughing out loud to that many books. This one did it for me. It's got a weird premise for sure, but it's a pretty conventionally told novel just about accepting love for yourself and being able to share that with others. The only mystery thriller that made my list is in the 4th spot. It's Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. This is just my speed. I wouldn't recommend it for everybody. It's a direct to reader mystery book, a little pretentious, following this guy who's talking to you about the story he wants to tell. And he's going to reflect in these pages on everybody who he's encountering, the people in his family, and the crimes that they've committed. At the start, his brother's just getting out of prison and they're having this family reunion. He's responsible for certain things that have gone on and he's scared about the interactions that are to come. There is an active murder mystery in these pages. Somebody is dead on their trip, but it's more reflective about how he's feeling about everyone in his life and all the experiences they've had. I found myself laughing out loud and gasping at things that we learned. So it was just a wild time and I can't wait to continue in the series. The 3rd spot on my list goes to another book that I read for my members book club, big successes this year, and also something I read for my Goodreads video and something that was suggested by a friend. I'm pretty sure it was Erin who told me earlier in the year that I was really gonna dig this one. It's Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. This is the first in a light, cozy fantasy series where you're following Emily, who is a professor, and she's building this encyclopedia of fairy lore. I just loved how established of a character she was, how well we got to know her. She is not the most charming person or personable individual, so when she goes to meet and learn from these townspeople about their local fairies, they don't really want to interact with her. But then swoops in a colleague of hers who she doesn't get along with, Wendell, and his charm works on everyone except Emily, but they end up working together for common goals. They go on these little adventures together. They're solving mysteries, getting into trouble, all in the name of research. Emily is so determined to learn about the fairies that she will get into kind of any situation. Emily and Wendell are my favorite, not quite a couple, romantic pair to follow, and I loved this so much. In my number 2 spot is another book club shout out, but it's the Literally Dead book club. I usually have one pick every year that hits it out of the park and feels like such a success. This year it was Monstrilio by Gerardo Samano Cordova. This is a literary horror story all about grief. It kicks off with a woman losing her son Santiago, and she decides to keep a piece of his lung just to stay close to him, but also there is this kind of fable that pieces of a person can make them come back to life. So indeed, this piece of her son's lung becomes sentient, and we're following 4 different perspectives, including Monstrilio himself, and over many years, and how they're interacting with various people. There's relationships, there's family drama. The adults involved feel very responsible for keeping Monstrilio safe, but at the same time, they're very frightened by him and recognize that he is doing bad things. It's heart-wrenching, the relationships are messy, but it's so beautifully told and one of just the best debuts I've ever read. And my favorite read of the year, the other nonfiction on my list, another essay collection, A Little Devil in America by Hanif Abdurraqib. Shout out to my friend Kate for recommending this to me, knowing that I would love it. This author is a cultural critic and a poet, and it's just my favorite type of media dissection where he's talking about Black performance. He's mentioning various artists, dances, movements, public figures, and telling us about them, reminding us of them. It's a very warm, inviting writing style. Even if you aren't familiar with what he's talking about, he really welcomes you in. But paired with that recognition and commentary, he's also sharing pieces of his own life and experience in the pages. And each essay has a very clear intent and takeaway, and was just perfectly told, had the exact impact you'd expect. My favorite essay in here is called Is It Safe to Say I've Lost Many Games of Spades? Just the ways that certain conversations come back around. He never forgets to call back on certain conversations and topics, and shares like this global universal feeling, but also just this singular experience that only he and his friends have. It sounds so simple, just a series of essays, but I can't oversell how skilled he is with language and concepts. So this is definitely, with all of the highlighting I did in here, could not be my favorite of the year. And that is my top 9. As always, thank you so much for watching and letting me know which of these you've read, if any, if you're planning on reading any of them. If you want to tell me your favorites down below, that's always fun to read. But also, if you're a channel member, there's a spreadsheet where you can share with me. I just opened it up a little bit bigger, and share with me like your top 10 of the year. I would love to know, because I'm doing something with that soon. And with that, I'll see you another day with something else. Bye.